Hi, my name's Lynn. This is my channel, The Tree of Life. Today I'm going to be doing a video. It's going to be the first in a series. It's going to be called The Nature of Reality. And my starting place is going to be the beginning of the universe. And I will use the term Big Bang. And by the way, if you see light dancing across my face, my apologies. I'm just trying to make do with where I'm happen to be at today. Little getaway vacation I'm on. Um, so I'm going to read out of a set of notes that I took quite a long time ago, and I'm just going to try to run through that real quick, and then I'll make some commentary on it. So bear with me if you would. Um, the Big Bang Theory. The universe began as a very hot, small, and dense super force, the mix of four fundamental forces. With no stars, atoms form a structure called a singularity. Then, about 13.8 billion years ago, space expanded very quickly, thus the name Big Bang. This started the formation of atoms, which eventually led to the formation of stars and galaxies. So, that's a pretty brief synopsis of what happened, why our universe began in the first place. I think it's a workable theory, I don't think this is just total fantasy. There may be a lot more you could add to it. Um, I'm also going to fill in a little bit more detail. I'm going to be referencing a chart. I'll share that with you. It's going to be backwards, but this will give you an idea of what it is that I'm looking at. Um, The very first thing that happens is the Big Bang and then Planck time, which is the smallest measure of time. And this is contained within the primordial era. And so the clock begins to tick. The universe is started and the clock is ticking, and space is beginning to expand. And our very first measurable unit of time is Planck time. All of this is going on within the primordial era, but the very first epoch is going to be the grand unification epoch. Then comes the inflationary epoch. The universe expands exponentially, and a separation of the strong force from the electronuclear force. So I believe they call that the strong nuclear force from the electronuclear force. Then we have the electroweak epoch. And the weak force at the end of that separates from the electromagnetic force, resulting in the four separate forces we know today. So we have gravity, electromagnetic force, strong nuclear force, and weak nuclear force. And I've got stripes of light dancing across my face, which leads into the quark epoch. Quarks become confined within hadrons, then the hadron epoch, formation of hydrogen nuclei, then the lepton epoch, lepton anti-lepton pairs annihilate, and we've just arrived at 1 second of the existence of the universe. So amazingly enough, all this stuff has gone on in 1 second as measured by our timeline. Then at 1 hour, we have the photon epoch, and I'm sure most of us know this. Those who don't, a photon is a unit of quanta or energy that we use to describe light energy. So it's a particle of light, a photon. This is going on between 1 year and 1,000 years. At 379,000 years, hydrogen and helium nuclei capture electrons to form stable atoms. Photons are no longer able to interact strongly with atoms. Cosmic microwave background radiation streams freely. And then at 100 million years, the first star begins to shine. So I tried to run through that as quickly as possible. I hope you bared with me. This is kind of the boring aspect of things, but I find it really interesting to drill down just a little bit deeper into the subject Big Bang. Like, what is the universe? Why did this happen? What was going on? Um, so what I got out of all of that is essentially two or three or four things. The first thing I will say is, let's look at the word universe. Okay, I'm going to break it down into two words. Unified, unitary, unity, totality of something. And then verse, just from what I understand that word means, is a verse. It could be a line in a song. It could be a line in a poem. A verse is a story, is it not? Or at least a sentence in a story. So I think that's interesting. So we have a unitary storyline going on. And time is running and the clock is ticking. What I interpret this to mean, and what I think is going on, is essentially, in order for a reality to exist, the first thing that you have to have is time. Things have to begin and start to change. Then you have division. You get the forces. The unitary one force divides into another force, and then that divides into two more forces. And then you have an aha moment. You go, oh my gosh, this whole thing is actually forces. And those forces turn into subatomic particles. We call them quarks. And honestly, I'm not well versed in quarks. Up quarks, down quarks, spin, antimatter, leptons, and all of that stuff. I will leave that to the experts and their willingness to spend years in university joining that priesthood and having wonderful ability to express their terms and priestly ideas, right? The priests of science. But that's enough to get a workable understanding of things for a layman like myself. I'm going to take these glasses off if you don't mind. So, I'm trying to build a reality, and the first thing I did was time, and then the second thing I did is I began a space, an expanding bubble of space, in order for things to be contained within. Without that, you got nothing, right? And I think it's useful to take a look at the word space and the concept of space. And, I'm waving my arm around in this space I call this room. But what's the opposite of space? And I would say density and no time, right? And that's a good definition for a singularity, Another example might be if Scotty from Star Trek were to teleport me or beam me into a block of granite, that substance isn't going to allow me very much space to do anything with, right? And these things, you just have to try to wrap your mind around them as best that you can. But then the next thing that happens is inside of this space, I need building blocks to make things out of. And so I've taken the super force and now I've broken it down into very small things that we call subatomic particles. And I like to look at those as the building blocks of a larger thing that I'm going to use the word pixel. And most of us are familiar with that term. That's what you see on your computer screen. That's what you're seeing right now. And it's a packet or a quanta or a unit of energy that's bouncing around on your screen. And it's configured to look like me and my lips flapping, right? So here I am, a two-dimensional representation of myself on your screen, and they're using the building blocks of pixels running through time to have this image of me talking to you. And most of you know this, so I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but it's useful to pause and really contemplate this, drill down just a little bit, hopefully not bore ourselves to tears. So now I've got time, I've got space, and I've got pixels. The next thing that happens is from those subatomic particles, I form a nuclei, which is an attractive unit. And that attractive unit attracts positive charge to it. We call those electrons. And I have my very first atoms. The first one is a hydrogen. It's a very simple atom, atomic structure, made of the four forces that are really one force. Then we get helium atoms, which are a little more complex. They have a few protons, neutrons, and electrons. Very simple stuff. Then what we end up with, we'll call those things, those first simple atoms, we'll call those cosmic dust. They have the force of gravity in them, the attractive force, and so those little quanta begin to coalesce together because of their attractive force called gravity. And so these atoms begin to coalesce and swirl, and we get nebulae and cosmic cloud, swirling cosmic dust, and then that eventually compacts together enough so that the force of gravity is multiplied, and then we get our first stars. And what are those things? They are thermonuclear entities out there in time and space, radiating out light energy, photons. And so from there, then we get planet formations. The ancient Jewish mystics called these things the first swirlings. I think that's good to look at it that way. Eventually, we arrive at solar systems, and we arrive at the first novas, the first exploding stars. It's useful to understand that heavier atomic particles form in the nuclear furnaces of stars. So in order to go from helium and hydrogen atoms to heavier atoms like iron and gold and uranium and all these other elements on the elementary table, I believe, if my memory serves from my chemistry class, it's called the elementary table, correct? Those novae explode. Our particular solar system is formed, and our star, the sun, Sol, is formed, and then life on this planet, and here we are. And what an amazing story in the universe, right? And it's useful to understand that's a big, long cosmic story, but then my life began as a big bang. I was the first, a little sperm and an egg came together, became one cell, and that cell began to replicate itself into organs and nerves and blood platelets and bones and brain matter. And I went through a 9-month evolutionary process as an amoeba, and then a fetus, and then a baby, and then I emerged out of my mother's womb and began my childhood. And I think that pattern more or less mimics the grand design of the universe. It was also born from a womb-like place, and it began to multiply and replicate itself, and began the story of its life, the universe, those verses. And I'm a tiny verse in that grand story. And then, one of the first books I ran across that got me going down this little rabbit hole of what is reality was a book by Michael Talbot, and it was called The Holographic Universe. And I think it's useful to understand that holograms are basically fields of light energy and information, right? So if you look at the beginning of the universe, what's going on here is time starts, space starts, and then information gets ejected into that. That's another pattern, right? Ejection, ejaculation, um, information, DNA, so to speak. Um, it's just a grand story going on, and stories are made up of information. And I'm made of information: DNA, RNA, genetic inherited information for my survival here on this planet as a human animal, so to speak. Um, but holograms are really interesting, and you may have heard this before, but the grand hologram would be the universe. And if I split that hologram into small pieces and make things out of them, I end up with stars, planets, and living things. And that's an interesting way to look at things. Um, this kind of gets me beyond just the average everyday, soap opera on TV and the typical routine of working for a living. I think it's useful to get to a higher level of awareness of what this is, what we are, where we come from. And then I think this eventually leads to the purpose that we're here. And I believe that purpose is to accumulate information and grow intellectually, spiritually, and physically. And of course, stories start, they run through the verses, and then eventually stories have to have a nice conclusion. We hope it's a happy ending, right? But I like to look at reality in terms of IT technology, and you will hear the term simulation thrown around a lot. I don't believe this is a simulation, but I believe it behaves like a simulation. I do believe that reality is computer-like. It does have atoms which are akin to pixels. It does have information like a database and a story does. It does have a screen like your computer system has with moving images on it. It does have levels of knowledge and awareness, and now we're on the verge of artificial intelligence. Hard to say if artificial intelligence will finally reach a point of sentience and emotional awareness and navigation, but I won't be around to see that in this incarnation. I'm just seeing the infancy of artificial intelligence. I didn't finish my ideas about holograms. The universe is a grand design, a hologram. If you split that into two, you get smaller holograms with the same pattern as the master hologram. If you split those into two pieces, you get four things, four holograms, less defined, less clarity, but the same pattern holds true. And you keep going down the levels of reality or existence until you finally reach the human level. And if this is a grand master hologram that we reside in, that means that we are a smaller hologram within the larger hologram, and we carry the pattern of the master hologram. And I know this to be true, and here's one test that I've looked at, or one explanation of it that's helped lock this into place for me or gain understanding of this. Modern day science, they say, can take one cell out of a living thing like a sheep, and they could take that one cell, and because it's holonomic, they could take the DNA and RNA information in that cell, and they can clone a new sheep out of it. And I think that was done years ago. I think her name was Dolly, right? And I think that science has mapped the human genome now, and I believe that we've reached a level of technology where we could take one cell out of our bodies, one small holographic cell, and we could reproduce our human structure. I just don't think we could reproduce our life experiences and memories, but you could probably train that human being to relearn perceptions and social attitudes, right? So I think this is enough for now. These are some of the things that I've put together to keep my life interesting and on point and on purpose. And it was just important for me to try to share that with you. I will add that I'm sure there's other people that have put this into better context or explained it better, or used better words. But this is my attempt to get some information across to you. And I will also say that I believe having a better or maybe larger understanding of reality begins to change your reality and what you can do with it. And I think that's super important. So I'm wrapping up video 1 in this series, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I wish everybody the best. I hope you're healthy, happy, staying safe. Take care until next time.